You can choose to think of that as a time to get together with your friends and have a celebration, or you can choose to think of that as, oh God, another one of these milestones, I'm 50, or whatever. How you think about it is going to determine how you behave. So let's see how this theory unfolds for a second. You can see immediately what I mean by Kelly's language. Okay, this is the fundamental postulate of personal construct theory. A person's processes are psychologically channelized by the ways in which he anticipates events. And you think about that for a second. What in God's name is this person talking about? A person's processes, what you do, what you think, what you feel, or what you want, are psychologically channelized. We're not talking about biology here or anything like that. By the ways in which he anticipates events. We anticipate events by virtue of our personal construct system, by virtue of the categories that we carry around in our heads to organize our experience of the world. Notice what's missing here. There's no reference in 2 volumes, almost 2,000 pages of Kelly's work to personality traits. He never once mentions anything remotely resembling the Big Five. There is no reference to motives. Motive theory, drive theory was very big in psychology at the time, doesn't have anything to do with it at all. Nor, for that matter, is there any formal discussion of the learning process, which was also dominant in the psychology of the 1950s. He's a very iconoclastic guy. He's just not playing the game the way other psychologists did. Nevertheless, he became a revered mentor to generations of psychologists, but everything's missing in this theory in terms of conventional ways of thinking about personality. So now let's unpack this fundamental postulate that what a person does, thinks, feels, his experience, his thought, his action is going to be structured and organized by his or her personal constructs. Okay, first corollary, this is actually a formal theory set out in terms of postulates and corollaries and all of that, something that was very big in psychology in the 50s. A person anticipates events by construing their replications. Again, why doesn't he just say you have expectancies, right? Because that's what he's talking about. But the way we construe what's going to happen next is by applying these various kinds of constructs, categories. Kelly distinguishes between core and peripheral constructs. Core constructs are ones that are very important to governing our experience, thought, or action. They are the primary ways in which we categorize the objects and events and people and actions in the world around us. Peripheral constructs are just less frequent, less powerful, less commonly used. We usually think about these constructs as verbal, that is, as something that you can talk about, but Kelly acknowledged that there might be what he called pre-verbal constructs that a person is not particularly good at articulating. This is as close as Kelly comes to talking about anything like unconscious mental life. Kelly is really focusing on conscious category systems that can be verbalized. That's the construction corollary. Then we get the individuality corollary. People differ from each other in their constructions of events. Again, each of us carries around in our heads our own repertoire of constructs, our own repertoire of concepts that we use to organize our experience of the world and our behavior of the world. So it's not just constructs. We don't all have the same set of constructs. Even if we grew up in the same culture, in the same part of the country, went to the same schools, every individual is going to have his or her own system of personal constructs. And again, these can be classified as core constructs versus peripheral constructs, verbal constructs versus pre-verbal constructs. The organization corollary. Each person characteristically evolves for his convenience and anticipate events, a construction system embracing ordinal relationships between concepts. All Kelly means by this is that our personal construct system is arranged in a hierarchy. We've got superordinate constructs, subordinate constructs, and constructs at some kind of middle level of analysis. But again, it never occurs to Kelly to actually just come out and say that, right? That our personal construct systems are hierarchically organized. He has to put it in this very complicated way. But that's the idea, okay? And the idea here really is that the implications of personal constructs vary. The implications that are carried by your personal constructs vary according to the level in the hierarchy that personal construct arises. Superordinate constructs cover a lot of territory. They have lots of behavioral implications. The lower you go in the personal construct system, the more fine-grained their implications are. If I tell you, if I ask you to go to a party with me, you apply your party construct, you say, gee, I wonder what kind of party it's going to be, okay? If I say, I'd like you to go to my cousin's bar mitzvah, okay? That's a special kind of party, right? It's got very specific kinds of implications, and you've got a personal construct that lets you know what's going to happen, what kinds of things are expected of you, what other implications there are, okay? So that's the general idea here. You have very specific implications that you can derive from subordinate constructs, very broad implications that you can derive from superordinate kinds of constructs. The dichotomy corollary. We don't just have concepts, okay, like party or whatever. Kelly argued that our personal constructs were organized in terms of something like polar opposites, that there's a construct and its contrast. Not necessarily its opposite, but a construct and its contrast, okay? So a person's construction system is composed of a finite number of dichotomous constructs. Party versus funeral, okay? That's one way to think about this. School versus play would be another construct. But notice that the dichotomy could be quite different. I could have a construct of school versus work, whose implications are quite different from if I had school versus play. Okay, one pole is emergent, that is, that's the one that comes to mind most frequently. The other pole is just a contrast, and it may not reflect the dictionary definition of the antonym of the construct. Work versus play, those are opposites in the dictionary, but work versus whatever the contrast is, that may not be the same as what you'd find in a dictionary. Some of these contrasts are submerged. Again, this is kind of what Kelly means by something that's unconscious or at least preconscious, where the person isn't really necessarily aware of what the opposite is. But the implication is that we are aware of our emergent constructs. We can specify how we think about the various objects that we encounter in the world, and I'll show you in a minute, 5 minutes, exactly how we do that. Choice corollary. A person chooses for himself that alternative in a dichotomized construct through which he anticipates a kind of predictive benefit. Again, the idea here is that our personal constructs are not imposed on us. We evolve them out of our experience, and we make choices about which constructs we're going to emphasize and which constructs we're going to ignore. Kelly has this very important construct known as cognitive complexity. And the general idea here is that individuals differ not just in which constructs they have in their personal construct systems, but they also differ in terms of the repertoire of constructs they have and the relations among them. I could have a single personal construct that I use to guide all my interactions. I have a very close friend who, known for almost 40 years, and as far as I can tell, he divides the world into 4 groups: smart, not smart, female, not female. Okay? and he pays particular attention to smart females, okay? But that's how he divides up the world. He doesn't talk about physical beauty. He doesn't pay attention to wealth. He doesn't pay attention to race. He doesn't pay attention to any of the other things he could pay attention to. He organizes the social world into male versus female and smart versus non-smart. And everything else is tied into that, okay? Now, what that means is, once you've decided, for example, if you've got a very monolithic personal construct system like that, you don't really have too many choices you can make about how you're going to talk about a particular kind of person. There's one of these four categories, and that's all you've got. But if you've got a more differentiated personal construct system, okay, where the constructs are not so monolithic, not so tightly tied together, you have lots of different ways to think about an individual, okay? So cognitive complexity is a good thing because, A, it allows you lots of different categories in which to classify objects. And remember that every act of perception is an act of categorization. You've got lots of different categorization possibilities. You've got lots of different ways to perceive an object. And remember, the purpose of perception is action. If you've got lots of different ways to classify somebody, you've got lots of different ways to perceive that person, you've got lots of different behaviors you can engage in. So this choice corollary is very important, and this idea of a construction corollary is cognitive complexity is very important, precisely because your degree of cognitive complexity is going to determine whether you can engage in constructive alternativism, whether you're even capable of thinking about somebody in a different way. Okay, the range corollary. Construct is convenient for the anticipation of a finite range of events only. This is Kelly's idea of a range of convenience, and all he means by this is that some constructs just don't apply to every instance. Okay, every construct has a scope to it, and that some events, some objects are going to be left out of that. Now, that's not going to be the case with a person with a very tightly bound monolithic personal construct system, because they don't have all those constructs. Those few constructs have to be applied to a very, very, very wide range of events or objects. Maybe even force you to make inappropriate classifications because you don't have anything else to work with. So again, superordinate constructs, very broad constructs, have a very broad range of convenience. Subordinate personal constructs have a much more narrowly circumscribed range of convenience. Experience corollary. We acquire our personal construct systems through experience. This is as close as Kelly comes to anything like learning, okay? And we refine our personal construct systems through continued experience. If you find that a personal construct is not working for you any longer, then you've got to develop a new construct system that allows you to anticipate events more accurately. So again, through experience, we engage in some kind of learning process about which Kelly was pretty much silent, where we either add new constructs to our system, drop some out because they're not working anymore, refine the definitions, or change their range of convenience. All of this occurs as a result of experience in applying our personal construct system. Okay, that's how that happens. Then there's the modulation system, and the general concept here is the permeability of a construct, which is to say, the vulnerability of a construct to change as a result of experience. Some people have personal constructs that they hold on to so strongly, so tightly, that they're not going to be changed by anything at all. Think about paranoid delusions for a second, okay? That Martians are controlling my behavior through radio transmitters that are embedded in the fillings of my teeth. If I'm a seriously deluded person, okay, there's nothing you're going to be able to say that's going to talk me out of that. You can do an X-ray and you can say, well, there's no evidence of a radio transmitter in the fillings of your teeth. Well, they have different materials that won't show up in an X-ray, right? There's nothing that you can do to kind of change this thing. But for most of us, most of the time, our personal construct systems can be modulated. They can be changed. But some are so tightly held, so strongly held, that nothing can get through to affect them. And of course, the more you've got impermeable construct systems, the more unlikely you are to change, the more resistant you are going to be to persuasion, and so on. Fragmentation corollary. Here we're talking about constructive alternativism again, and the general idea here is that it's actually possible in Kelly's world for a person to hold two incompatible ideas in mind at the same time. Okay, it's provided that your personal construct system is elaborated in such a way that all these constructs are not so tightly bound together. So to go back to my friend who divides the world up into smart, stupid, male, and female, those are independent constructs. He's well open to the idea that there are smart and stupid men and smart and stupid women. Stupid people can be male or female or whatever. So he can think about somebody as one or the other, in terms of one construct or the other. So again, some people can't do that. They've got monolithic personal construct systems that don't allow them to entertain alternative hypotheses, that don't allow them to say, well, yes, this person disappointed me this time, but there were these circumstances, and I understand his point of view, so I won't change my opinion about him in general. It's this kind of thing that's discussed in those balance and dissonance theories that Fisk and Taylor talk about in the early part of their text, where ordinarily we would like to have all of our attitudes in balance with each other. If I like Lucy and Lucy likes Joan, then I'm supposed to like Joan. Okay? Or in terms of dissonance theory, if I am a conservative person and I end up voting for Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, somehow I've got to be able to reconcile that behavior with my underlying attitudes, precisely because I can say, well, I had reasons for voting for Barack Obama, okay? And they don't have anything to do with my underlying devotion to conservative principles. If you've got a particular kind of personal construct system, you can do that. Okay, and then finally, well, not quite finally, the commonality corollary is also important because it says that you can't have a relationship with another person unless you understand his or her personal construct system. You don't have to share it. You don't have to agree with it, but you have to know what it is. That the whole basis for a productive, adaptive, social interactions is that each person knows how the other one is thinking. Walk a mile in another person's shoes, as the proverb goes. So again, two people are similar, not because they've got the same personality traits, not because they're located at adjacent points in a five-dimensional space of the big five or something like that. People are similar if they're cognitively similar, if they have roughly the same or overlapping repertoires of constructs, and if they emphasize the same poles of a construct. If I've got a personal construct that is good and bad, but I emphasize the good side, it's going to be hard for me to be friends with somebody who's got the same good-bad personal construct, but who emphasizes the bad side. So again, similarity in cognition is the basis for both the similarity in personality and productive social relations. And again, a variant on this, the sociality corollary. To the extent that one person I love this language. To the extent that one person construes the construction processes of another, he may play a role in the social process involving the other person. Kelly can't even bring himself to say the word behavior here, right? But the idea here is that if you understand how another person is operating cognitively, then you can have a relationship with that person. Okay, so there's a way in which we can assess people's personal constructs. I've got about 2 minutes, but this is something you can actually go home and do in the bathtub tonight or on the beach over the summer or whatever. Kelly developed what he called the role construct repertory test. It's discussed more in the lecture supplements, in which he presents a person with a number of social roles: your mother, or the person who played the role of mother in your life; a neighbor that you'd like to know better; a neighbor who's caused trouble for you; a boss that you like; a boss that you didn't like; a number of common social roles. And the person is supposed to identify individuals from his or her own life who instantiate each of these roles. They're examples of broad constructs. And then what Kelly does is to select 3 of these at random and ask the person to indicate one way in which 2 of them are alike but different from the third. And then pick another triad. How are 2 of them alike and different from the third? Notice that what you're getting here, you're extracting a person's constructs, how he thinks about people being similar and different. You repeat that for a while, and then later on, you ask the person to rate every role on every construct that's been elicited here, and then you can do all sorts of statistical analyses to identify clusters. But the most important thing in the role construct repertory test is that by getting the person to think concretely about the people in his life, how they're similar and how they're different, this is a technique for extracting how the person thinks about the world. And you can imagine, for example, that there's a person out there who, how are 2 people different, similar and different from the third? Well, 2 are women and 1's a man. Pick another 3. How are 2 of these different, similar and different from the third? Well, 2 of these are men and 1 of them's a woman. Pick another triad. Well, 2 of these are women and 1 of those is a man. That's a person with a monolithic personal construct system. He only sees the world in terms of gender, right? Whereas somebody else might say, well, 2 of them are women and 1's a man. 2 of these are smart and this one's not so smart. This one's really friendly. These 2 are not friendly. That's a person with a very varied personal construct system. The rep test, the role construct repertory test, is just a way of extracting that. There's a good example of it in the lecture supplements, and you might just kind of try it as an exercise yourself. It can be quite interesting. Yeah, quick question. Yeah, but you can imagine doing this and never even talking about gender. Okay? Because I could, of 3 people, I could just as easily say 2 of them are nice and 1 is not nice. 2 of them are smart and 1 is not smart. But if I keep saying 2 of them are women and 1 of them is man over and over and over again, that tells you what I'm thinking about all the time, right? And that's what Kelly's trying to get at, is how people think about these individuals. Okay, next week we're going to be looking at a variant on this. We're going to return to cognitive sociology and talk about how reality can be constructed through social cognitive processes. See you Monday. Thank you very much.